Welcome to Unspoken Affairs. I never thought I would find myself telling this story. Even now, speaking it aloud feels like pulling apart layers of my soul that I've kept hidden for so long. But sometimes silence becomes heavier than confession, and the heart aches for release. My name is Evelyn. I am 48 years old, and for many years I lived in the shadow of my own loneliness. I thought my story had already been written, that the best parts of my life were behind me, sealed away with the memories of my late husband. But then something happened, something so unexpected, so intoxicating, that it woke me from years of quiet slumber. And though I carry shame for what unfolded, I cannot deny it also gave me back a part of myself I thought was gone forever. It began on one of those gray afternoons when the world feels heavy, when the sky hangs low with clouds and silence seeps into the walls of your home. I was in the kitchen, staring at a sink full of dishes I had no desire to wash, when the doorbell rang. The sound startled me. It had been so long since anyone had come unannounced. My heart gave a small flutter, and I wiped my hands on a towel before going to the door. When I opened it, there he was, Matthew 25, maybe 26. He was the son of an old family friend, a boy I remembered seeing run around my yard years ago, back when he was too young to notice much of anything. But time has a way of reshaping people, and the man standing before me was no boy. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his presence filling the doorway with an energy that I hadn't felt in years. He smiled in that casual, easy way that only the young seem to carry, and for a moment I forgot how to speak. "Mrs. Harris," he said, his voice rich and warm. "I hope I'm not intruding. I just thought I'd stop by. It's been such a long time." His words tugged at something inside me, a reminder of the years gone by, of the distance between who I had been and who I had become. I invited him in, of course. My house, though tidy, suddenly felt alive with his presence. The way his footsteps echoed in the hallway, the way his eyes roamed the pictures on the walls, it all stirred something I didn't want to acknowledge. We sat in the living room, the clock ticking softly in the background. He told me about his life, how he had moved back into town after years away, how he was working, trying to find his place in the world. I listened, and yet I found myself distracted. His voice was smooth, his laugh infectious, and when his eyes met mine, I felt exposed in a way I hadn't in years. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me like that, like I was more than just a widow, more than just someone's mother, more than a woman whose best days had passed. It unsettled me. It thrilled me. It terrified me. The hours slipped by unnoticed. What was meant to be a short visit stretched into the evening. I offered him coffee, then dinner. We sat at the table, our conversations growing more personal, more vulnerable. He asked about my late husband, and though it hurt to speak of him, Matthew listened with such genuine empathy that I felt tears sting my eyes. He reached across the table, resting his hand lightly on mine. I didn't pull away. That small touch awakened something deep inside me, a hunger I had buried beneath years of silence and restraint. His hand was warm, steady, grounding me in the moment. And yet, beneath that steadiness, there was something else, an electricity, a spark that lingered long after he pulled his hand back. When he finally left that night, the house felt emptier than before. I stood at the door long after he had gone, staring into the quiet street, my heart pounding with questions I didn't dare answer. Why did I feel this way? Why now, with him? I told myself it was nothing, just the loneliness playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew better. The days that followed became a blur of restless thoughts. I found myself waiting for him, listening for the sound of his knock, imagining what I would say if he returned. And when he did, a few days later, I welcomed him with a warmth that surprised even me. Our visits became a pattern. At first, innocent coffee in the afternoons, long talks about life, laughter that filled the hollow spaces in my house. But slowly, inevitably, the air between us changed. His compliments lingered, his glances held, a weight that made my breath catch, and I didn't stop him. In fact, I found myself encouraging it with my own unspoken responses, the way my smile softened when he looked at me, the way I leaned closer when we spoke. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the room, I found myself standing too close to him in the kitchen. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the faint trace of cologne mixed with something uniquely his. He looked down at me, his eyes searching, hesitant, as though asking a question without words. My pulse raced, and for one reckless moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to close the distance between us. But I didn't. Not then. Instead, I stepped back, my heart pounding, my cheeks flushed. He smiled almost knowingly, and I busied myself with the dishes. Though my hands trembled so badly, I nearly dropped a glass. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every moment, every glance, every accidental touch. I hated myself for wanting more. I hated myself for feeling alive in a way I hadn't in years. And yet, despite the guilt, despite the shame, I couldn't bring myself to push him away. Weeks turned into months, and the tension between us grew. Each visit was a dance around the inevitable, a careful balancing act of restraint and desire. I told myself it was wrong, that he was too young, that people would never understand. But when he looked at me, when he laughed with me, when he sat across from me and listened as though every word I said mattered, I forgot all of that. I remembered what it felt like to be seen, to be wanted, to be alive. And so, one night, when the weight of silence became unbearable, I let my guard slip. We sat in the dim glow of the living room, the air thick with unspoken words. He reached for my hand, and this time I didn't resist. His fingers intertwined with mine, and the world outside ceased to exist. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and in that moment I knew we had crossed a boundary that could never be uncrossed. What happened after is not something I need to describe in detail. It was not the act itself that mattered, but the way it changed me, the way it shattered years of silence, the way it reminded me of the woman I once was. For the first time in so long, I felt alive, desired, cherished, and yet with that came an avalanche of guilt. Every morning after, I would stare at myself in the mirror, torn between shame and longing. I knew society would condemn me. I knew my family, if they ever found out, would never forgive me. But I couldn't bring myself to stop because Matthew didn't just fill the emptiness in my house. He filled the emptiness in my soul. Our story didn't have a fairy tale ending. These stories rarely do. The weight of reality eventually came crashing down, and choices had to be made. But for that brief, fleeting chapter of my life, I lived, truly lived. And though I carry the scars of guilt, I also carry the memory of a time when I was not invisible, not forgotten, not just a shadow of who I used to be. I share this now not to seek forgiveness, nor to justify my choices. I share it because sometimes the heart writes its own story, one that defies reason, logic, and even morality. And though I know many will judge me, I also know some will understand, because in the end, this is not just a story about forbidden love. It is a story about loneliness, about longing, about the fragile human need to feel alive, no matter the cost. And maybe, just maybe, it is a reminder that beneath the layers of guilt and shame, we are all searching for the same thin connection.